more in depth on the airstrikes on Médecins Sans Frontières Hospital in Afghanistan, with at least 22 people dead. The group says that attack amounts to a war crime. Gregory Gordon is a law professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He's been a prosecutor, advisor and scholar of cases involving war crimes, so he's the perfect person to discuss this with. He joins us live from Hong Kong. Thanks so much for your time and joining us on CNN today. So let's start here. Doctors Without Borders says this is a war crime, which is the most serious charge you can make in a conflict. But based on what we know, which isn't much, does it appear to be anything close to that, in your view?
Well, on the surface, when you see a hospital attacked, as it was, and 22 people killed, there is a credible allegation of a war crime. But we don't know a lot of the facts surrounding it, and I think we have to be cautious before we jump to any conclusions. Remember, this is an area of active combat, and it may be that there were operations in the vicinity and that the hospital was not directly targeted or intentionally targeted, in which case it might be collateral damage, and there are other issues that you have to consider.
And MSF says the reason they feel this is a war crime is because, in their view, the hospital was targeted precisely and repeatedly. One of the unknowns, though, is where the Taliban were at the time. For example, the Afghan government says that there were militants inside the hospital who were armed. MSF says that's not true, and even if they were treating Taliban militants, they typically leave their weapons outside. Is that a key question, or one of the key questions you want to get the answers to? Absolutely.
Because if this was a direct and intentional attack, it's a hospital, which is a protected site. You cannot, under the laws of war, attack sites such as hospitals, schools, religious buildings, things like that. However, the hospital as a building can lose its immunity if it's being used by the enemy for military attacks. So we would need to know exactly what kind of attacks were being carried on in the hospital, if any. And as well, the United States, even if attacks were being carried out from the hospital, would have to respect certain principles of precaution. In other words, they would have to make sure that they were using weapons that would be the least destructive. They would have to give warnings to civilians to try to get them out, things like that. So it's very complex, and we would need to know those facts.
And the U.S. will be investigating itself. How much faith do you put in an investigation like that? And MSF says it should be done by a third independent body. Is that even possible?
Well, that is also a complicated question, and I think the answer to it is, if you look at realpolitik, it's going to have to be the U.S. that conducts the investigation. Let me say that the United States has conducted investigations into allegations of war crimes before. It has put on trial its military personnel in connection with war crimes allegations, and it has prosecuted them. So let me just say that it's not out of the question that if there were, in fact, a war crime committed here, the United States could undertake a legitimate investigation and possibly prosecution.
All right.
That said, there have been allegations the other way, and certainly the United States is not subject to the International Criminal Court. And that's something that a lot of people criticize the U.S. for, because there's no outside body that can make sure it's being held accountable.
And it's angered a lot of people, and we just have to wait to get more information. My thanks to Gregory Gordon there, war crimes scholar, joining us from Hong Kong. I appreciate it.